Now Henry Bear could hear the attack helicopter drawing near. He stood alone in the old barn with plans for his hemp satellite spread before him on an ancient table of coarse wood. The blueprint could survive the dust and discarded hay, only he would not be able to live if the war machine spinning in the air outside got its way. He rolled up the plans, looking around the old barn that had been passed down through the generations to him. Outside, a flamethrower began torching his hemp field from the helicopter hovering 20 feet in the air. He watched the action through missing boards still attached to the skeleton of the barn. He worked on the hemp satellite here, close to the crop, one of many hemp projects and designs that occupied his time. Only now the field he cultivated took the form of orange plasma. The dry old barn attracted the heat, and the wall of flames moved toward him. With no time now, he got on his knees and opened the trapdoor under the table. Above, bullets sprayed from the helicopter's machine gun, sending debris crashing to the hard dirt floor. Safe under the table, he now descended a ladder to a dark tunnel below. As he closed the door to the light above him, he could hear a voice on a megaphone above the whirl of the helicopter's blades.
Henry Bear, that old barn is going to burn down soon. We can talk about your future. We'll even give you a lift back to your family.
The scene outside became muted as he moved down deeper into the abyss. He didn't worry about his family because he knew they were all doing fine. His wife, twin daughters, and son had been moved to a safe house a week ago. That's after this disagreement with Robert York escalated. Henry Bear made it to solid ground and coolly began walking down the familiar corridor. He reached for his cell phone inside his blazer, then dialed for his ride.
Henry, sounds like there's trouble overhead.
Answered a voice on his phone after one ring. Then an explosion and the sound of the old barn filling in the ladder well behind him. His escape now secure thanks to the overkill.
Mr. Sinclair, can you meet me at the spot? Pretty sure the ATV no longer exists, not to mention the rude guests.
Already en route. That helicopter skimmed the roofs of the village and looked to be headed your way. It didn't disappoint. Tomorrow I'll file a claim with the insurance company on behalf of the trust.
Appreciate it. See you soon, old sport.
Henry Bear hung up the phone, then used the flashlight app to help navigate the passageway. When he emerged into the open country air, the last rays of sunlight had already vanished, as stars began to appear in the sky. Only behind him, the glow of the old barn on fire heated the horizon. No sound of the helicopter. Now the beam of headlights seemed to bounce on the small hills of the road. Soon the Bentley Brooklyns came to a rest, as Henry Bear opened the rear passenger door, hopping into the fresh leather seats of comfort.
Guess we've made progress on the design,
Henry Bear said, adjusting himself after his ordeal escaping an attack helicopter.
I'd say it's rather clear that you've made someone very angry,
said Mr. Sinclair in his English butler sort of way.
It's Robert York. I've no doubts about it. Only why would he make such a public display? There are still police. He must know there's going to be an investigation. He's obviously insane. I've got to get to Tokyo now. Can you make me travel arrangements?
Of course, that shouldn't be a problem with the Olympics taking place there. Only they're still on lockdowns. Even with a vaccine, you might find it difficult to move around.
It's all right, Mr. Sinclair. I can manage the risks once I'm in the city. Only I've got to find a company to partner with. Liu Hui helped me create the hemp graphene. If we're going to continue our attempt to save the world with a sustainable resource, then we can't stop now. Chocolate cake, please,
said Henry Bear as he sat in the bullet train now speeding across Japan at more than 200 miles per hour. The train attendant took a slice of chocolate cake off the rolling dinner tray and sat it on a small table next to Henry Bear. She then took a polite bow before continuing forward in the train, on her way to a group of Olympians. The Olympians could be seen all over the train car, their strong physique and determined look. They smiled broadly with enthusiastic laughs, yet they were all business looking for gold, not tourists awestruck at the historic Japanese architecture. Henry Bear had his own seating area. He took off his N95 mask, took a sip of coffee, and then a giant bite of chocolate cake. The freshly baked moist cake melted away, leaving a thick, rich chocolate icing taste. He took another sip of coffee, the hot liquid getting into his teeth where the chocolate icing had taken root. The two mixed, then dissolved, sliding down his throat. Next to him, inside a hemp plastic tubular container, sat the blueprints to the hemp satellite. He had saved them from the old barn explosion. Now he was in Japan to meet Liu Hui, a skilled engineer with whom he'd worked with before. They shared a vision of hemp being central to the future green economy, a renewable resource for next-generation ecological technology. The hemp satellite, just one of many possible breakouts for the industry. The reason for the hemp satellite space junk. All satellites to this point in our civilization are made of metals. There are thousands of satellites in space right now that are no longer operational. Only as the population of these satellites increases, so does the likelihood of collisions, creating more metal parts, speeding around the Earth while in orbit. Hypothetically, all of these pieces of metal could one day make space travel impossible. Future satellites made from hemp could solve this problem once the space junk is removed, while maintaining a fleet of satellites for our civilization's needs. Henry Bear took another bite of chocolate cake, his eyes scanning the scene flashing past the windows of the bullet train. A graveyard stacked high on the hillside. The cement sarcophagus streaks of gray and black. Then the reflection of a man walking toward him on the train. Henry Bear turned his attention to the aisle where the same man stood before him. He made eye contact, feeling the darkness in his stare. A coldness gripped his body. Henry Bear put his mask back on, just as the stranger nudged past him, then fell back into the seat across from him. Only the table with Henry Bear's coffee and chocolate cake separated the two, in this private first-class seating area.
Can I help you?
Henry Bear said. The chill persisted to be a new phenomenon replacing his well-being.
What?
Asked the stranger.
Can I help you?
Repeated Henry Bear.
Sorry, I couldn't make out what you were saying with the mask muffling the words from your mouth. Is that chocolate cake?
The stranger spoke with a slight Midwestern accent. He wore no mask. He had a 5 o'clock shadow, while dressed casually cool in a blue jumpsuit that could signal he had a position on the maintenance crew of this train. Only, he presented himself as polished clean, familiar with office walls inside government buildings.
Yes, it's chocolate cake,
answered Henry Bear. The two were on a bullet train in Japan, just as this chocolate cake had Nama chocolate made locally. It didn't contain the added preservatives imported from a foreign country. So, who could this maintenance man be if it didn't define his profession?
Robert York sent me to pick up those plans. You know, a lot of people are upset about these ideas you're spreading, Henry Bear. Hemp can save the world and all that. Where do people like you come from? Why can't you just stay holed up? Why are you traveling the world? You know this entire globe has been drawn up, only you're not a board member.
Robert York. Weeks ago, my family and I had a terrible vacation mishap with some sharks. That's the first time I heard the name Robert York. Then my old barn set on fire before a violent explosion. Witnesses say they saw attack helicopters. What's all this business with Robert York?
Demanded Henry Bear.
Robert York is business, Henry Bear?
Then Henry Bear could taste it, the slight hint of almond cyanide. Henry Bear ripped his face free of the N95 mask, then put his hand in his mouth as he jumped out into the train aisle. On his hands and knees, he induced himself to start vomiting. The stranger stepped over him, walking toward the front of the train with the hemp satellite blueprints in his hand. A crowd of spectators noticed the scene he had created, on the floor, puking. The train attendant's face pure panic. Some Olympians looked confused. Then one of the athletes dropped dead.
He's poisoned the chocolate cake,
heaved Henry Bear with some of what remained of his life force. All attention turned to the unshaven stranger in the blue jumpsuit. He made a dash back toward Henry Bear. Only one Olympian tackled him, then others piled on to pin him down. The train attendant screaming for security, who Henry Bear could see further down the train car, the slick black rim of their hats shielding their eyes. Henry Bear stood at Shinjuku Cross, holding a brown paper box in both hands, while watching the three-dimensional image of a large cat meow above the busy street. Below, in the new Cross Shinjuku space building, a promotion for a bamboo satellite had taken over for the week. The image of a bonsai tree zipping into space repeated across the glass windows of the three-story building below the three-dimensional cat. Inside, being where he intended to go, for the meeting Louis Hui had arranged. Henry Bear had stood where he stood now, before the pandemic. At that time, the Alta building next door had dominated his attention after leaving the East train station exit. Now, he wore a mask, looking at the three-dimensional cat from social media, his fingertips feeling the abrasive surface of the brown paper box. It weighed close to 35 pounds. Not too heavy, yet now standing for a couple of minutes, it began to pull on his shoulders. The brown paper box ornate with old postage stamps for show. A piece of yarn cutting all 6 sides of the cube in half, serving the function of security. It would need to be cut before opening the brown paper box. The light said walk. Henry Bear moved with the rest of Tokyo, now crossing the street. A man ran through the crowd with experience, not touching anyone as he passed, in a rush to catch a train. The humidity slowly pressing his hands into the brown paper box. So he shifted the box in his hands, hoping not to leave sweaty palm prints. More than a month ago, he had almost died from cyanide poisoning on a bullet train filled with Olympians. He felt the same moistness from his body then. To make matters worse, he had contracted the coronavirus from the Frenchman who had nearly killed him. The Olympics had ended. Now, after spending most of that time in the hospital, Henry Bear didn't feel confident in his health. He kept pushing forward, toward his dream of using hemp to create sustainable materials for modern civilization's needs. In his mind, he could see his wife and 3 children. They smiled, waving him to continue, while surrounded by nature with crisp air and clean water. He stopped in front of the Cross Shinjuku space building. The cat meowed overhead, only he could just see the black screen of the digital signage now. He examined the posters of the bamboo tree with a blue swirl of motion reaching for the stars. The building, an advertisement for the bamboo satellite as an advancement in technology. All of this, the work of Mr. Fujimoto, the man he meant to meet. Once again, he shifted the brown paper box in his hands to keep his warm palms from planting themselves. Sweat starting to pour from his skin as the humidity of the busy Japanese street corner melted him. He made his way inside Cross Shinjuku space, and instantly coolness chilled the liquid on his body. The air conditioning inside on full blast. Clean-lit displays adorned the spacious exhibit space. He stepped toward one of the displays, where a video demonstrated how Harajuku girls could have a bamboo satellite launched into space. The reasoning for the idea not clear, only the style of the video catching the interest of the patrons passing through the promotional building.
Ice-cold beverage? If you want coffee, I can go down to the basement cafe?
Asked a young waitress. An ice-cold beverage sounded perfect, only he held the brown paper box in both hands with no place to set it. He could put it on the floor, just didn't like the idea, and so he asked the waitress.
Can you tell me where to find Mr. Fujimoto?
In his rough Japanese.
3rd floor.
She said, pointing to a staircase at the end of the room, away from the front entrance.
Thank you.
Henry Bear said, bowing. He stepped away from the gravity of the scene with the display and the waitress, now on track to reach his goal. As he climbed the stairs wearing a mask, fully vaccinated and recovered from a COVID-19 infection, he couldn't help to pull away from people walking down the stairs as they passed him. The effort conscious to swing the weight of the brown paper box toward the handrail, his body bracing against it to give a few more inches of social distancing. He couldn't help to think of climbing the floors in Game of Death. Only Bruce Lee hailed from China, and this Japan. Much like his friend Louis Hui, with her connections to China, while working as an engineer at Toyota. Now on the 3rd floor, he could see a man built like a sumo wrestler, wearing a black kimono with Star Wars written in gold across his chest. Henry Bear walked again to the opposite side of the room, 3 floors below the entrance he had entered. Above outside, the 3D cat meowed. The coolness of the room made it easier to walk with the brown paper box in both hands.
Mr. Fujimoto?
Henry Bear asked, giving a bow.
Yes, Henry Bear, would you like an ice-cold beverage?
Yes, thank you.
Answered Henry Bear, as he placed the brown paper box on a small bar table. Behind it, Mr. Fujimoto poured water into a glass of ice. Behind him, through the posters on the window in the sunlight, he could see where he'd been standing on the busy street corner below. Henry Bear took his mask off before drinking the cool liquid offered to him, then said,
This is an amazing promotion.
Thank you. My marketing team decided on it as soon as they heard this space would be opening. Millions of people pass through this intersection. They all know about the bamboo satellite. It's sustainable and it's traditional. It's the future of the Japanese space program. Best of all, it's affordable, offering opportunities for people like yourself to help explore the cosmos.
Mr. Fujimoto pitched.
You forgot that it solves the problem of space junk.
Added Henry Bear. This made Mr. Fujimoto laugh.
That's right. Not to mention, that's the most profitable aspect of this entire endeavor. Especially with the threat to space travel once metal satellites break up enough to surround the globe. Organic materials allow the use of satellites to continue while creating space debris that's less dangerous. You know a lot, Henry Bear. Why don't you tell me what's in the box?
A present. The brown paper box made from hemp, inside.
A hemp satellite. Liu Hui mentioned it when she put it together. She needed a little help since she doesn't have my experience with satellites. You were in the hospital. Why would I want to help a direct competitor?
I wouldn't say competitor. Look at this entire building dedicated to your launch. This is just a simple satellite made from another material that grows more abundantly around the world. Bamboo makes perfect sense in Japan. You could carve out a niche on the global market with more exposure because there would be a similar product line elsewhere, just trying to get off the ground.
Now Henry Bear started to feel himself again.
I've done too much already. Liu Hui, a good friend. I helped her, because of my debt to her, on other projects here in Asia. You're right though, bamboo grows best in Japan. Something like hemp might be better in other climates. The world needs whatever we can produce to supply all of civilization's needs in a sustainable way. I'm going to write the name and address of an associate in Europe. Find him. He could have more interest in a partnership. Leave the brown paper box here. I'll launch it into space to test how it performs.
Mr. Fujimoto finished, then ripped paper from a notepad that he gave to Henry Bear. The marigold flowers extended from the glass vase in the kitchen window, making it a golden summer on Puget Sound for the Bear household. Mr. Sinclair called the neighborhood where waves gently lapped on the docks, the village. More than a month ago, an attack helicopter had nearly clipped the roof as it raced out to his back 40 to destroy the old barn. Now Henry Bear washed the dishes after a golden summer meal, reunited with his wife and their 3 children. He had just returned from Japan and a business meeting with Mr. Fujimoto. Mr. Fujimoto would launch his hemp satellite into space to test its systems, only for a long-term arrangement. He needed to seek out a European associate of his. As these thoughts filled Henry Bear's mind, he looked out at Puget Sound beyond the marigold flowers, the water glinting with sun rays. There were small boats, ships, and even ferries moving people around from Seattle to the nearby islands, a sight he had familiarized himself with during his years of residence in this home.
Thanks for remembering my favorite flowers,
said Jasmine Bear as she hugged him. She squeezed him a little tighter, aware of the recent dangers they had faced.
The marigolds really brighten the atmosphere,
said Henry Bear. As a Native American from further east in the state of Washington, he knew the flowers were not from this area. Otherwise, they might be gray to match the rain clouds that most often filled the sky. Yet on this golden summer day, the marigolds highlighted the accents of the warm, watery edges of Puget Sound.
What a nice late afternoon. The smoke from the forest fires has even cleared out. You're lucky you missed the heat wave. Some older people passed away in Seattle because they didn't have AC.
Jasmine Bear continued as if in a dream, content with the meal they'd just shared after so many weeks apart.
Yes, it's unreal to learn that happened here. In Japan, the humidity nearly drained me of all the fluids in my body. Only that's something you might expect there. This recent heat wave here can only be from climate change, as the governor stated. That's why our work remains more important than ever.
A hemp satellite can't solve anything on Earth, silly,
Jasmine Bear said, giving him a kiss on the neck. They both looked at the marigold flowers on the windowsill, staying fresh in water. Henry Bear unlocked his wife's embrace as he turned around to face her. He could see the children on the other end of the kitchen island, in the open space living room, watching cartoons. Now he locked his eyesight on Jasmine Bear's eyes, the two staring deep into each other's souls before he closed his eyes and kissed her on the lips. When he finished, he drew back, opening his eyes again to look at her. She moved her head, and Henry Bear could see the marigolds in the moist reflection of her shining eyes.
Hemp satellites are just one aspect of this adventure, my love. You know better than anyone else that we need a break. Hemp's been legal for a couple of years now, and there's not a single corporation ready to purchase it in bulk to replace their existing manufacturing materials. It's been relegated to a source of CBD only,
Henry Bear said, with signs of frustration engraved on his face.
It's true. When we got my great-grandfather's design for the hemp car, I thought we had made it. That's been years ago now. You even had the genius to create hemp graphene as an affordable solution to carbon fiber graphene to be used as a supercapacitor for hydrogen fuel cell cars.
and then they decide they want all electric.
Henry Bear said, finishing his wife's sentence.
So what are we gonna do?
Jasmine Bear said seriously, now meeting his gaze.
I have to go to Europe and press the hemp satellite idea, since that's been gaining traction. Then hopefully we can get some real exposure that allows us to circle back to hydrogen fuel cells. That's what makes the most sense in solving the climate issue. If we can get people in cars that have water exhaust, then our children can have a real future and heal the scars of rising temperatures. Not to mention COVID-19.
Henry Bear said, looking past his wife again at the children.
You're traveling to Robert York's neck of the woods. Even as the CEO of Lichen Oil, he doesn't seem too concerned with our lives, Henry Bear.
You're absolutely right. It's a Fortune 500 company, and yet he sends an attack helicopter, then a Frenchman to poison me. One Olympian died on that train from the chocolate cake he'd put the cyanide in. And yet, I've been unable to connect these events in a court of law to Robert York's defense.
Be careful, Henry Bear. We want you to save the world, not get yourself killed.
A raging bull stood on the cement walkway now, with nostrils flaring, intense eyes radiating the mean feelings of the four-legged beast. Then the fireworks went off, sending Henry Bear running downhill and the bull after him. Thankfully, the sun still sat languidly on the horizon, its lazy orange sunrays illuminating the small coastal community in the Atlantic Ocean. Above, the lights of fireworks mixed in with the navy blue sky, a place where the sun no longer had energy to shine upon. The effects of this lighting scheme played well on the plain white walls of the simple village. Shadows from wooden barrels defined in one direction created a haze in the other direction. Only none of this hindered Henry Bear from navigating the newfound pathway. And so, Henry Bear ran downhill, frightened of the raging bull that had just surprised him a moment ago, its hooves clicking and clacking into the cement. Ahead, Henry Bear kept his sight on the dock extending into the seawater, the smell of meat cooking in the summer air, the sounds of a carnival atmosphere as onlookers watched Henry Bear run past with a large raging bull on his heels. The running of the bulls in Pamplona, Spain, had already taken place more than a month ago. Henry Bear ran through the streets of Terceira on the Azores Islands of Portugal. The Raging Bull Festival did take place on the island today, and right at that moment more bulls were released onto the streets, only nearer to the docks as tradition allowed. How this raging bull, now chasing Henry Bear, had appeared on the pathway above the marina could be left to speculation. Yet Henry Bear's mind shot out a name: Robert York. Henry Bear really began to exert himself now. Even with the adrenaline, he could feel the effort of breathing as he tried to maintain his pace of a full-out sprint, his aging dad body tightening with sharp stabs of pain. Some people crowded around him joining in the run. Others laughed in the background. More screams of jubilation as another crowd ran from a bull toward the sea. While the feeling of the festival took away the fear of death, he still ran like mad, with the thought of being impaled by the raging bull driving him forward. One fierce step in front of another as the crowd competed for space on the cement ground that's covered in water at high tide. Henry Bear almost lost his balance, only to be picked up by the spirit of the locals, a mob of enthusiastic prey for the raging bull. Now the multitude of hurried steps hit a new pitch with the wood dock underfoot. People began to peel off, jumping into the water on the right or left. Henry Bear continued straight down the middle, irrationally determined to race to the end of the dock. All the while, the raging bull kicked on the beaten path. It stampeded down the dock, becoming the epicenter of this festival that pitted man versus bull. A sense of awe captured the spectators with a view to witness the event. Henry Bear reached the end of the dock, jumping into the ocean, while at the same time maintaining his manic wind sprint, the effect hilarious for some. Only the raging bull still pursued, falling into the water. This action drew gasps of concern because the mighty bulls cannot swim. Some brave sailors in a berthed boat nearby rushed to the end of the dock, using mooring lines and a lasso to ensnarl the raging bull and pulled it ashore. This ensured that nothing had been harmed. Henry Bear treaded water, watching the monster being dragged away to keep it from drowning. A Duffy boat slowly made its way to Henry Bear as he swam to the dock, keeping his head above water.
That was impressive.
A man in a blue-striped muscle t-shirt called out, standing in the Duffy boat. He held a glass bottle of beer and smiled.
Thanks, only I didn't mean to become a showcase at this year's festival.
Good sport. Tourist?
Business. I'm looking for a European associate.
Henry Bear, look no further. Your European associate is here.
In the sky, they could see a small green light streaking across the stars. The hemp satellite had taken flight thanks to Mr. Fujimoto. On a small table in the backyard garden of the European associate sat a laptop computer displaying the information being relayed from the green light in space. Henry Bear watched in fascination from the hill above Terceira on the Azores Islands of Portugal. Just this evening, he'd been stopped by a raging bull that ran him down the dock. Now, after his introduction to the person he'd hoped to find and a good dinner, they observed the hemp satellite in real time with their own eyes. He thought of Jasmine Bear at home with their children looking into the sky and seeing the same sight. It had been such a difficult fight to finally own this moment on Earth as a living human being. Even better, all of the instruments looked good. The engineers worried about space radiation on the electrical panel inside the hemp shell, crafted to withstand the rigors of spaceflight better than metal. Hemp satellites offered the same amount of service time as traditional satellites, only excelled in burning up in the atmosphere with less pollution, and no chance of something landing on Earth. Cheaper to build, they offered the public a chance to take advantage of a satellite system that could be diverted safely into the Earth's atmosphere at the end of its operational life. This prevented space junk from building up in orbit around the planet, a problem that existed right now, as no mission to seriously clean space junk had taken place yet, with the threat of space exploration ending as a result. Hemp satellites cost the same to launch as traditional satellites, for the most part, as they were a little lighter. Henry Bear could attest to that after paying Mr. Fujimoto in full for this mission. Only now the European associate offered a different business model with a launch system tailored to his product. Henry Bear would be able to launch his own hemp satellites and could launch more than one at a time to keep costs down.
Sure you don't want a beer?
Asked the European associate, extending an arm toward Henry Bear with a glass bottle in his hand. He'd been drinking these bottles of beer since Henry Bear met him at the boat dock. The small island offered a peaceful life and not much to do.
No thanks, I don't drink alcohol.
Muslim?
Henry Bear had never been asked that question before. It must be this island, this place, so close to Islam.
No, I'm Native American.
Red, white, and blue, huh? Need to drink Budweiser or something?
No.
Henry Bear said, laughing.
I'm Native American, drum circles before the white man, Native American.
Really, never met a Native America before, just Americans.
The two looked skyward again at the little green light. Soon it would start bending around the Earth and vanish from sight, as it made another lap around the planet, passing Jasmine Bear in their home.
Well, Henry Bear, your hemp satellite looks like it could be a winner. To be honest though, you really need to test this for another year or more, just to be safe. We wouldn't want to launch a lot of these into space and then find something wrong with it. That's what Mr. Fujimoto said. He might even share innovations he's discovered with his bamboo satellite tests.
That's what Mr. Fujimoto said? He's probably right. Hope things might move as fast as that green light up there in the heavens. Only I've become accustomed to setbacks and delays. Just hope the pandemic subsides. Your island here is lucky, no masks,
said Henry Bear.
Yeah, think we're all hoping this pandemic ends soon. Not much need for satellites if people are sick on the ground.
At that moment, Mr. Sinclair called Henry Bear's phone with an urgent message. The long thaw had set in, as the pond in Abbey Park could once again accommodate the resident ducks that swam in the cold shallows.
It's been unseasonably cool here in Leicester,
said Robert York. Clouds of warm air materialized when he spoke before fading away.
Do you know why the ducks live here year-round, Henry Bear?
I've no idea,
said Henry Bear.
Because the park ranger clips their wings, making it impossible to fly,
answered Robert York. Henry Bear still felt the surreal spell of the moment. When the summer started, this man had his people attempt to kill Henry Bear and his family in a failed shark attack. Then a helicopter leveled his old barn, not to mention the cyanide poison in the chocolate cake from the Frenchman in Japan. The trial still pending. Only the raging bull, on his path to the European associate, remained questionable. So when Mr. Sinclair had called his cell on the hill above Terceira, on the Azores Islands of Portugal, Henry Bear couldn't grasp the full weight of the meeting being proposed. Even now, did his feet really remain planted in the thin layer of snow on the edge of a pond in Abbey Park after a long thaw? Only for Henry Bear, his frozen heart for Robert York might have just began its long thaw. Still the reservations and the worry that at any moment a ninja might flip out of a tree with nunchucks. Robert York now walked along the edge of the frozen pond. Henry Bear followed, feeling the long thaw under his jacket as the chill faded with each step he took.
Too bad we got off on the wrong foot, Henry Bear. You're a talented individual, only ahead of your time.
Not long after they'd left the park, crossed the River Soar, and continued down Abbey Park Road. This all happened in silence, as the two men let their eyes settle on the gray mist of the ancient English town. Henry Bear had never been, while Robert York rolled over the grounds like a ghost, always haunting this place for eternity.
Almost there.
were the next words spoken after a good stroll. Robert York lifted his cane to point at Leicester Cathedral straight ahead.
This is the tomb of Richard III and my family's connection to royalty.
Henry Bear took another good look at Robert York, the CEO of Lycan Oil, a Fortune 500 company. He thought back to the European associate, letting him know the hemp satellite would need at least another year of testing. Then to Mr. Fujimoto, who already sold the dream of bamboo satellites, now here with Robert York as a simple Native American man from the U.S. Pacific Northwest, a place once ruled as a British colony known for fur trapping. His push for a sustainable future with hemp production somehow stepping on this man's toes.
Why don't you want hemp satellites, Robert York?
It's not that I don't want them, Henry Bear, it's that the idea happened too soon. What's the reason for you and Mr. Fujimoto creating your business model?
They stopped before the doors to Leicester Cathedral, each having their own honest reflections about where each man stood in relation to the other.
Space junk,
answered Henry Bear.
That's right, space junk. You and Mr. Fujimoto can't clean the space junk in orbit. You're only offering to send more satellites into space that won't add to the problem. Well, you should know, as I've already informed Mr. Fujimoto, Lycan Oil has agreed to a partnership with Roscosmos to clear out all the space junk.
Really?
Henry Bear felt stunned by the news.
Yes. We're going to start next year. We can even recycle the old satellites, selling the material to traditional satellite makers, people who have proven their technology works. They'll never need to worry about obsolete spacecraft filling the upper atmosphere again. From now on, there will be a way to retrieve them and bring them back to Earth. So, unless you can prove hemp satellites offer another competitive advantage, then...
I'm finished. Wow, Robert York, that's really something. Seriously, that's going to allow space exploration to continue for future generations. I'm sure there's a market for what I'm developing. It just looks like a smaller portion of the overall market. Less than we'd hoped for.
Glad you can see it that way, Henry Bear. I really do. So, let's visit Richard III, and I've got us tickets to the Leicester City football match this afternoon at King Power Stadium. It's right over there.
Robert York said, pointing with his cane again. Henry Bear looked up at the old stone facade towering before them, his eyes straining further into the long thaw of the winter storm clouds overhead, the colder temperatures they'd brought slowly fading with the white glow of sunshine. Invisible, the tiny green light of the hemp satellite circling the globe once again.
Okay, let's do it,
said Henry Bear. The pear tree provided shade for the entire Bear family now sitting on a blanket enjoying a Sunday picnic. Not too far off, the charred remains of the old barn captured their attention as if it were a television playing in the background. It had almost been a year since the attack helicopter had torched the place with a flamethrower. No hemp had been planted this year. All the fields were tilled. Only nothing had been planted. Henry Bear felt the need for a year of relaxation as he thought about the future without hemp. When the old barn burned down, he'd lost about 10 acres of hemp. Henry Bear had still managed to cut and dry another 30 acres, yet it all proved to be worthless. At this time, hemp mostly got used for CBD products that weren't FDA approved. He had been trying to develop textile uses for his hemp. Robert York put an end to that avenue.
Glad there's no smoke today,
said Jasmine Bear as she finished making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and handed it to their young son. Their twin girls had harvested yellow flowers on the walk to the pear tree and now sat making a dandelion chain.
Yes, glad the smoke finally cleared. Sounds like the fire is going to keep growing, though. It could make its way here if the wind shifts in this direction.
Without a crop in the ground, we don't need to worry about the fire too much, so that's a good thing,
Jasmine Bear said, trying to put a positive spin on the situation.
That's true.
Henry Bear followed suit as he looked up toward the sun shining through the green leaves of the pear tree. The pears were not fully developed and were fastened to the tree like round steel rivets.
The pear tree might burn down, though, so there's still that to worry about if the fire makes it all the way over here.
Jasmine Bear laughed at the thought. Only as she looked at the children taking a mental picture of this moment, she felt a twinge of pain thinking of the pear tree being scorched.
I know we only planted the pear tree here to fertilize the ground with the fruit. Only after today, this pear tree will always remain in my memory. The thought of all of us being back together after all you've endured is a cherished time now and forever,
said Jasmine Bear.
Then I should take a picture. This wildfire season could be worse than last year. It's only a matter of time before a fire makes its way here and burns this pear tree to the ground,
Henry Bear said as he stood up. He walked about 10 yards toward the old barn, then turned around. Before him sat Jasmine Bear and their 3 children, wearing Sunday best outfits. Dappled sunlight from the pear tree's limbs sprinkled down on them, all around their land. Henry Bear used his phone to capture the moment, then uploaded it to social media, tagging Jasmine Bear before sitting back down. At that moment, Jasmine Bear put her hand over Henry Bear's and smiled.
It's okay, we're luckier than most, Henry. We don't have to work. All we must do concerns raising our children. They're not due for school for another year. Hopefully the pandemic will end by that time. We should do something extraordinary together.
We could sail around the world in our yacht? That's if you're no longer afraid of sharks.
Yes, Henry, you're not the only one to have a brush with death this last year. Let's do it!
The children suddenly gave their parents' conversation attention.
That's right, kiddos. We're going on a trip around the world before you girls begin kindergarten. It will be educational, I assure you.
His twin daughters laughed while his little boy looked around in wonder, not exactly sure of what it all meant. While Henry Bear still felt upset that hemp couldn't find a way to become a sustainable resource for civilization, he could find solace in his children living on after him, and knew that he would now train them in survival techniques in preparation of an apocalyptic event. The end.